So we got through the meditation and all the announcements, and now we get to talk about entering this new year. And I did a little research about the calendar because I had heard someone once give a Dharma talk in which they said that the calendar that we have is a complete fiction. In other words, it's not based on anything. And I always just took that to be true. And then I thought, you know what? I better find out a little bit more about this. So I did some research, and it turns out that that's accurate. That once upon a time, we had a calendar that was based on the cycles of the moon, but that has gone through multiple iterations. And our calendar moved from a moon based cycle to a sun based, a lunar calendar. And then over the years and decades, hundreds of years, there have been many iterations of what we think of as marking time. Mm. And one of the things that I found really interesting about the phenomena of marking time is that as there was a shift from a moon based calendar to different iterations, the heart of it was about spiritual practice. That the heart of the calendar was all about celebrating holy days. And in particular, the calendar that was created focused, for some reason I didn't understand, on trying to locate Easter in the Christian tradition on a particular date and time. And based on that, there was these systems of hours, weeks, months, up to what we have now, in which we have, as you know, 12 months of the year, but the months all have different numbers, right? They're different. Some months are 30 days, some months are 31 days, some months are 29 days, right? So it's actually a little bit haphazard. And there have been different efforts at different times to make a calendar. There have been times when a week was 10 days. There have been times when every month was 30 days, etc. The key is that there is 365.24 days to a year, a year as the planet turns. So there is this odd phenomena that there's 365 days plus essentially a quarter of a day, which is why we have even now this phenomenon called leap year, right? So every 4 years, we have 4 quarter days that add up to become an extra day. So we get an extra day for a year. So I'm telling you all this because I hope you begin to get a feeling for the fact that the marking of time is all a fiction. It is constructed. We made it up. And once upon a time, we made it up primarily for praising God, right? For spiritual reasons. And nowadays, as we all probably know and experience, our calendar has something to do, right? We had the Christmas holiday, we have the religious holidays, but a lot of the calendar is much more based on capitalism, right? We have quarters, and those quarters have income that comes in and out, and taxes that need to be paid, and the stock market that goes up and down, et cetera, et cetera. So there's been a shift over time in the kind of functional use of the calendar to coordinate among us in time. And of course, there's good reason for having a calendar, right? Functionally. If I say, we are going to meet next Sunday at 6 o'clock for SFI, and everybody has a different idea of how long a week is, or what 6 o'clock is, or how many weeks there are in a month, then it becomes very difficult, doesn't it, for us to coordinate, for us to meet together in the way that we are. So what all of this is doing is pointing us to the fact that this is a made up phenomena. This literally, we're marking time, right? I have this image all day as I've been thinking about this. It's like drawing lines in water. Mm. And we're drawing lines in something that's actually very alive and fluid. Mm. And this understanding that there is a functional use of drawing those lines, it's practical, it's useful, it's helpful. But if that's the only thing that we see, if we only recognize minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years as lines on a page, as a calendar or on a computer, then we're missing something, aren't we? We're missing something about the direct experience of time and of time passing, and really of our life passing. Mm. So this points to one of my favorite teachings in the Buddhist canon, which is called the teaching of the two truths, which is sometimes described as there's a relative truth, which is a conventional truth, and the kind of time that I'm describing, this lines in water, the calendar time, the tick-tock time, what's called chronos or chronological time. This kind of time is understood as relative or conventional. It's a convention that we make up in order to support our functioning. But there's another kind of time, which is related to the second kind of truth. The second kind of truth is what's called the absolute or essential truth. And this is very much about the kind of direct experience that is pointed to in our practice, that we come to know in our direct experience, and certainly in meditative practice. And this is related to this second kind of time, these terms chronos and kairos, which is I sometimes call deep time. It is the time that, well, if you've ever sat a period of meditation and it's felt like it's taken friggin' forever, right? It's the same, whatever it is, 30 minutes, and it feels like it might as well have been 12 days. Or if you've ever sat down for a period of meditation and suddenly the bell rings and you're like, wow, that went so fast. That is pointing us to this other kind of time, where in our direct experience, time is actually quite fluid. How we experience time is different than how time feels on a calendar or on a watch. This is what's called kairos. So all of that is context for welcoming in a new year. We understand that the whole construction of a calendar and of a new year is a convention. It's a fiction. And it can be a useful one, because we as humans can imbue our conventions and certainly our kind of ceremonies and rituals, which the new year is. We imbue those with meaning or not, right? This is from Stephen Batchelor. He says, life is neither meaningful nor meaningless. Meaning and its absence are given to life by language and imagination. For life to make sense, it needs purpose. Even if our aim in life is to be totally in the here and now, free from past conditioning and any idea of a goal, without a sense of purpose, life would be meaningless. A purpose is formed of words and images. So this is really an invitation to use this convention, this made up thing of the new year, and to imbue it with language and imagination, to bring a sense of meaning and purpose to this transition by how we relate to it, which of course is true for everything. All of our life is a string of unfolding events, and how we relate to them, the meaning that we make of them, shapes the quality of our experience. So for many of us, the new year is marked by, New Year's resolutions. And a New Year's resolution for most people is do more of this and less of that. That's the kind of framework for a traditional New Year's resolution. And I have read, it said, that something like 80% of New Year's resolutions fail. So we have this grand tradition, and we get all of our energy up and we set these goals for ourselves, and then, we don't hit them, and then we feel bad. Seems like not a very good idea, doesn't it? I read an article today, maybe it was yesterday, in the New York Times, and it was very moving, really. It said that people this year were feeling not so inspired to have these big goal New Year's resolutions, that there was less interest in, like, I'm going to get to the top of the ladder, I'm going to achieve this, I'm going to, whatever it was. Because, well, it's been a rough few years, hasn't it? And what people said was that what they wished for was not so much accomplishment and achievement, but things that were more like a sense of stability, a sense of ease, a feeling of connection, of peace, of contentment. And I thought, oh, this is more in alignment with Buddhist teaching, which is not so much about New Year's resolution as something I'm going to do or stop doing, but is much more about a setting of intention. This is what Amy was just describing for Vinny, saying the wish to have this sense of generosity. An intention is less about something you're going to do or not do, which is a goal that you set for yourself. An intention is much more about a quality, a way of being, a way of relating to experience that you want to bring forth. Ease, generosity, kindness, stability, equanimity, etc. So I want to say a little bit more about this teaching of intention, which shows up in Buddhist teaching not just on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. It's really very central in many ways. And I hope if I talk about it in a variety of ways, it will help you kind of find your way into a sense of your own, finding a way into your own sense of intention for this fictional new year that we are all entering together. So the first thing is that the wise intention is the second step on the Eightfold Noble Path. So the Eightfold Noble Path has three sections: wisdom, ethics, and meditation. And the wisdom bucket is the first two steps of the path, which are wise view, which is kind of our basic orientation to life. And in Buddhist teaching, our view, the lens that we look through is about suffering and the end of suffering. It is about finding a sense of freedom and well-being in the midst of a life that is often, as these last years have been for many, many people, quite difficult. This is the orientation. It's not about, as I was describing before, it's not an orientation about achievement or accomplishment. It's something else. So this is the orientation, wise view. And then the second step, once we get our kind of orientation, is wise intention. And I think of wise intention as a kind of directionality. Like once you get oriented, then which way are you going to go? And there's a beautiful short poem that many of you have probably heard me offer that comes from Ryokan, the Zen rascal poet, monk. And the poem I love also because it really reflects these two truths, both the absolute, which is where he starts, but also the importance of the relative. And this is the poem. He says, Buddha is your mind. Let's chew on that for a bit. Buddha is your mind. And the way, the path, the way goes nowhere. Don't seek for anything but this. This is the absolute teaching. This is the pure Dharma. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to get. There's no one to become. It's all right here. Buddha is in your mind, is your mind. And you don't need to look any further than this moment right here. That's it. But that's only the first half of the poem. That's the absolute side. Buddha is your mind, and the way goes nowhere. Don't seek for anything but this. And then he goes on. This is the relative. He says, if you point your cart north when you want to go south, how will you arrive? This is intention. Intention is pointing our cart. It's not about achieving the accomplishment of arriving. It's just giving us a direction. So this is our intention. Our intention is to be generous. Our intention is to be kind. Our intention is to find greater ease. We're not declaring that we have to do something or become something or even know how it's all going to work out when we get there. Because in a way, there's no really getting there. All there is meeting each moment with this fullness of heart. So this is sort of the quality of intention setting, pointing our cart. So there's one other piece there's actually two other pieces about intention that are worth mentioning. And one is that there's this well-known phrase in Buddhist teaching that says all of karma, karma means action, all of karma hinges on intention. Now, what that means is that whether an action is considered beneficial or not beneficial, wholesome or not wholesome, helpful or not helpful, hinges on intention. So I think of it as in every moment, every action, there's an arc of karma. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the beginning of an action is an intention. Before you do something or say something, there's an impulse, an intention. And then there's the action. And then the completion of the arc is the impact. And the idea in our practice, our mindfulness practice, is an invitation to stay awake through that whole cycle, to pay attention to our intention, to do our best to stay awake while we are engaged in thinking, doing, saying, and also to notice the impact. But the key, and this is again, that karma hinges on intention. And this is really important because the same action can be skillful or not skillful, beneficial or not beneficial, depending on the intention, right? So a classic example is a knife cutting skin. So a knife cutting skin is very different if it is a surgeon, right? The intention is different than if it is someone who is intending to do harm, right? So you get that, the difference. And so part of our aspiration or intention in the new year is to invite each of us to begin to pay attention to that cycle of karma, and particularly to pay attention to our intention. This is a very humbling process. Often we don't notice our intention, and if we start to pay attention to our intention, if we're honest, we notice it's often mixed, right? Sometimes we can fool ourselves into thinking, oh, I'm doing this to try to help the other person. And it's really not to help the other person. It's because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. Or we can be angry and then just try to justify it afterwards, right? Do something out of anger or harm, do some harm, and then talk ourselves out of, oh, but my intention was good, right? So this isn't meant to be a setup to punish yourself, but it is an invitation for you to start to pause, maybe. This is how I found this helpful. Like before you hit send, before you post, before you speak in some situations, before you silence yourself. Sometimes the most skillful thing, if your intention is to be of service, is to be helpful, is to be beneficial, is not to stay silent, but actually to speak up, right? So this can be a super useful place for us to start to pay attention, just to start to notice before I do something, before I say something, even just to ask the question, what's my intention? And that doesn't suggest you should or shouldn't do it. That's not the point. The point is to ask the question, to start to notice that there is an intention, even if it's muddled or confused for you. It's a useful way of engaging. So we have this wise intention as a kind of direction, and we have this paying attention to intention in terms of our actions. And the last piece that I'll say about it is that um, there is a very beautiful traditional teaching about intention, which says that there's three kinds of wholesome intention, which I will simplify into two parts, the yes part and the no part. So I'll start with the no. So it's understood that there is a skillful intention that has to do with renunciation, with saying no. This is, for me, the skillful intention that reminds me, reminds you, reminds us that we live in a limited human body, that we have limited time and attention and energy and life. It reminds us that there is mortality. And because of that, it's really important for us to take care of what we say yes and no to. And that saying no, rather than being a rejection or uh, an aversive response to something, can actually come from a place of deep care and appreciation for the preciousness of our life. That we want to make sure that we are aligning ourselves with what really matters. And so, in this way, the intention of renunciation can help us stay focused on what we really care about, on what matters most. And the second two, that was the no bucket. The second two, the yes bucket of wise intention, are kindness and compassion, which many of you know are two of the four qualities of the heart, the Brahma Viharas, that quality of warmth, of tenderness, of care, of metta, loving kindness, and the quality of compassion, of karuna, which is when that warm, open heart touches difficulty. It's the compassionate response when we meet pain, when we meet distress in ourselves, in others, in the world. And this is the quality, or these are offered as qualities that we say yes to, that we make an intention toward. So I am going to read a pair of poems. They're by the same author. And they are, for me, a much more beautiful expression than I just offered of these two buckets of no and yes of our intention. And I'll read them to you in the hope that they will inspire you, as they have inspired me over the years, to use the truth of impermanence, of mortality, of the truth, the humility of our limited human life and lifetime as a way to invite us to align ourselves with what's most important by saying no and by saying yes. So the author of both poems is the Palestinian American poet Naomi Shihab Nye, who some of you know I had the privilege of meeting And I have loved her poetry for a long, long time. And then I got to meet her. And in my mind, she was this sort of giant of a person. And in real life, she was very tiny. It was this little tiny person, but with so much wisdom. So these are her poems. The first is called The Art of Disappearing. And this is a beautiful expression of this wise intention around renunciation. And she has a sense of humor about it as well. She says, when they say, "Don't I know you?" say no. When they invite you to the party, remember what parties are like before answering. Someone telling you in a loud voice, they once wrote a poem. Greasy sausage balls on a paper plate. Then reply. If they say, we should get together, say, why? It's not that you don't love them anymore. You're trying to remember something too important to forget. Trees, the monastery bell at twilight. Tell them you have a new project. It will never be finished. When someone recognizes you in a grocery store, nod briefly and become a cabbage. When someone recognizes you in a grocery store, nod briefly and become a cabbage. When someone you haven't seen in 10 years shows up at your door, don't start singing them all your new songs. You will never catch up. Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any second. Then decide what to do with your time. Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any second. Then decide what to do with your time. We live in such a go, 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 do, fill, 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 accomplish culture that it can almost feel like an insult or an embarrassment to say no. But I love how she frames this no saying, not because you don't love them anymore, not because you don't care, not because you're aversive, but because you want to remember something too important to forget, because we all want so deeply to stay connected to what really matters. And to do that in the nonstop influx of so much in our world, sometimes we have to say no. And to do that requires a kind of humility in recognizing I can't do everything. I can't be everything to everyone. So let me do my part fully, wholeheartedly. There's a beautiful phrase from the Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who was responding to a question from a student who asked about, there's so much trouble in the world, like how can I help? Some of you may feel that way. in our world today. And he said, don't worry, you don't have to take care of everything. You just shine one corner. You just shine your one corner of the world, and you remember that everyone else is shining their corner. So if we're going to shine one corner, it means we can't take on the whole floor, right? It means we have to say no so that we can genuinely, fully take care of what we care about most. So that's the first part, the no bucket, the renunciation, the intention of renunciation. And here is her second poem. This one is more well known, I think. It is appropriately titled Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a wheel broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you can know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is you I have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. So it may be that with this made up turn of the year, that 2023 will be better than 2022. And I hope so. For me, for you, for all of us, for the planet. But the seed of goodness that comes from difficulty is this. The seed of goodness that comes from sorrow, from loss, from difficulty. And there has been so much that we have lost. Lives, we've lost hope, we've lost jobs, we've lost, you can fill in the blank for what is true for you in this stretch of time. And this is something we share. This is part of our human condition. And it's not to be praised, but it is to be received with kindness. This is the only, perhaps, benefit of the truth of dukkha, the truth that there is suffering in human life, is that when we allow ourselves to be touched, that our hearts can be softened, that we can feel kindness, that we can feel compassion, that we can let this quality of tenderness come through. So, this too can be part of our intention in whatever words you want to use for yourself, that we can meet whatever it is that comes, whatever difficulty, with this tender heart. Because difficulty is part of our inheritance as human beings. It's not here because you're doing something wrong. So, for yourself and for each other and for all of the people in your circle of friends and family and loved ones, your colleagues, your neighbors, there is plenty of sorrow, plenty of suffering to go around. And part of the orientation of the intention is to meet it with some quality of heartfulness. Mm. So maybe these feel like high bars rather than low bars, but these are different quality of intention than our more traditional New Year's resolution that are about doing and getting and becoming. These are ways of orienting toward our life that can help us transform, transform ourselves, transform each other, transform the world, each of us in our corner.